What if you could experience the same precision and clarity that professionally calibrated studios all over the world use and be able to take it with you anywhere you go on headphones? And not just the world's most expensive headphones, but on the ones you already own. Hey guys, it's Steve from Featherlight Studio, and in this video we're checking out IK Multimedia's brand new ARC on-ear system. Now this takes the same precision audio quality that you find in professionally calibrated studios all over the world, and it puts it in a completely mobile device that you can take anywhere. Conference rooms, hotel rooms. Imagine having that kind of audio clarity and precision in something completely portable and something that's not tied to a proprietary set of headphones, but rather the headphones you already own. Now you're probably familiar with the ARC systems. IK Multimedia's had these out for a little bit and they are incredibly powerful. Both the hardware and software versions are used in professional studios like ours and others all over the world, and it's incredibly precise and reliable. But imagine having that kind of clarity and reliability every single place you go. Let's check it out. Don't be fooled by its size. The ARC on-ear has some pretty impressive specs. This is a very high-res audio playback interface, up to 192 sample playback, a backlit operation for all the buttons, it's fully bus-powered, internal battery for analog use, computer playback via USB-C, external playback via audio in, and a machined aluminum chassis, all stuffed inside of a package that's just slightly larger than a set of car keys or even an earbuds case. The ARC systems are incredibly easy to set up, and much like its bigger brother, the ARC Studio, which goes between the computer and your studio playback speakers, the ARC on-ear system does the same thing. It goes between your computer and the playback speakers, only in this case, our playback speakers are the headphones. The IK Multimedia software install process is usually very straightforward. However, if you don't have any of their prior software, you're going to want to download IK Multimedia's Product Manager, and this is kind of where everything happens. It's the hub for all of your software installs, shows you modern promos and all that kind of stuff, and this is where we're going to register our serial number for the ARC on-ear system. And once we hit register, it's going to go through that entire process. When it's finished, it's going to tell us it's done so, and then it's also going to give us some updated information. From here, we can navigate over to the hardware tab of the product manager, and this will show us our ARC on-ear registration. It'll give us the download link to the manuals, and you definitely don't want to skip this step. This is a comprehensive manual. There's a ton of great info in here, and the ARC on-ear system is deceptively simple. It's super easy to set up, and it really is intuitive, but this goes through all of the other features that maybe won't be immediately apparent. So definitely download the manual. From here, we can also go down to the software download area. We can download the Mac or Windows version of the app. The ARC is battery powered for analog work, but in its USB-C position, it's fully bus powered. Before you start the software for the first time, you want to power up the ARC, as it's an audio interface, so it needs to be detected before the software can use it. And like any other audio device you add to your Windows or Mac system, you'll need to go into Audio and MIDI setup and assign your computer's playback audio to the new device. If this is the first time you plug the ARC system into your computer, you may get a firmware update needed notice. If so, simply agree to it, and then it starts updating the firmware in the background. IK Multimedia makes this process pretty painless. And once it's all finished, it'll simply ask you to hit the close button after it's done successfully, and you'll see the splash screen for the room correction software application. When you first start up the application, you're on the frequency response screen. You've got a toggle up here in the upper left-hand corner. You can switch between that and the space. And the space screen basically just gives you a visualization of a studio environment. And if you've chosen virtual speakers and things, it'll animate those as well. For the time being, we're going to start in frequency response. And thankfully, IK Multimedia made this resizable. Thank you so much for doing that. And right below our toggle switch, we have the legend, and in the blue line shows us what our uncorrected headphone curve actually looks like. And then the post or orange line shows the corrected headphone curve. The next section is going to be metering and the function button assignments, as these can be pretty comprehensive. Underneath our frequency response, we've got our input levels. These are the input levels going into the calibration system. And then on the other side, we have our output meters for the total output. Up here on the top in the center, we've got our function button assignment. And this is for the function button on the face of the ARC. And we can assign that any of these features. It can be phase align, it can be virtual speaker enable, it can be mono. We can dim the overall output, we can mute it, we can turn all the LEDs on the unit off or on, and then we can use it as a play and pause button. So far, what I've really discovered by using it is, man, the mono button is very cool to be able to click that thing and instantly get a mono readout without having to change anything in your DAW. That's a really handy thing if you set up specific mix buses or matrix and you don't want to mess with those. Having a mono button here, especially a hardware one right on the ARC, is a super convenient hardware function. Next up, we're going to actually select our headphones because the headphone selections that we make are going to really affect some of the other modules in the process. So we're going to click on that tab and we've got a whole bunch to choose from here, just a ton of different models and a bunch of different manufacturers. There's a lot of stuff to go through here, so we won't go through all of them. On the left-hand side here, we've got manufacturers, and then we can also search through there. And then up on these tabs here, we can search by all, or we can search over the type. So over ears means they sit on top of your ears, but not over them completely. And then circumaural is the ones that go over your ears completely. We can also use the impedance tab here. This allows us to select our headphones, but the impedance of them. And after we've filled out all the filters, we can simply just scroll down through all the pictures until we find the model that we currently have. In our case, we've owned several different AKG models over the years. We got the Mark IIs. We got the studios here. So a lot of stuff to choose from and just about a ton of different, just AKG models alone. If we scroll down a little further here, we also own Audio-Technica M40Xs. And we got 20 M30, M40Xs. So we've got those. We've got a pair of those as well. So let's choose those for the time being. Next up is the calibration section of the ARC on-ear, and this is where we're going to be able to see our headphones' actual audio curve and even do custom adjustments on top of the filter. So if we press a button on the interface, that'll enable the calibration. We can also turn it on and off manually here, and if we do so, it'll turn the button on the interface off as well, meaning it won't be illuminated. So we have real-time control on either surface. And we have a phase align button as well, which will phase align that same frequency correction response. This adds a bit of latency to the overall playback, but usually in mixing, that's not a dramatic thing since we're not recording at the same time anyway, but something simply to be aware of. If it's turned off, the latency is insanely low, 1.5 milliseconds for round trip, which is basically hardwired. The studio simulation is pretty amazing. It uses groundbreaking DSP to basically recreate the natural feel of studio monitors in an ideal control room with no problems or resonance. If we click that, the same thing is applied. If we click it on our interface, it'll turn it on and off. And if we click it here in the application, it'll turn the lights on and off on the audio interface as well. And we can add ambience to that. We can also control the width of the playback. If we click and hold one of the speakers, it'll isolate that speaker in the stereo field, either left or right. This is a great way to kind of test exactly how much width you actually have during playback. And I think this is really important working on headphones, as this helps to really establish the sense of studio space. In addition to modeling headphones, the ARC on-ear gives you a pretty impressive selection of speakers to emulate. The tab right next to that is the Virtual Speakers tab. And if we assign our function button to the virtual speaker choice, we can do the same thing that we can do with studio simulation and calibration. We can click the hardware button on the interface and turn this virtual speaker section on and off. And this is actually pretty handy. So we'll click that back on for the time being. And you'll notice when we do that, those animated speakers up here that were kind of semi-transparent, now they're completely opaque and we can see clearly what they are. And we can select speakers in our choices up here in the speaker category. And there's a bunch to choose from here, even things like smartphones, portable speakers, a television. And if we scroll up here, we can see they have modern white in a 5-inch. These are pretty similar to the 8-inch ones we have here in the studio, so we're going to go with those. And this model emulation takes place in addition to the already pristine studio space that we have to work with. So this is a great opportunity to get an idea of what your mix would sound like through these different kinds of speakers. Great idea here, tons of portability. And all of these configurations, whichever you choose, can be stored in the 5 preset locations over here under the output meters area. And the last major section of the interface is the studio emulation space itself. We get here to the studio space by clicking on our little toggle here. And this takes us to IK Multimedia's pristine modeled studio space without all the resonances and problems, and maybe more importantly, character of another studio. And in addition, if we want to model certain types of speakers inside that studio space, we can simply turn them on or off. For example, it's not really helpful to model other famous people's studios they've spent their lives acclimating to if we never knew what they sounded like as a reference to begin with. So this perfect studio environment solves that problem. On the upper right-hand side here, we got a battery level, and this shows the ARC's overall battery. If we click on the settings wheel here, it takes us to the relevant info. All of our serial number and firmware versions show up here, battery health. This is also where we can set the dim attenuation. So if we have our function button assigned to the dim feature, we can turn it down by this amount that's set. Also our LED brightness, we can actually change that into different percents if we want it less than 100. All right, enough specs and details for a minute. None of that's gonna matter if this doesn't hold up on the road. We need to get this guy out into the real world and find out if it lives up to the hype. It's got a really nice machined aluminum chassis, and it's gonna need it if it's gonna take some bumps and bruises and still be dependable on the road. We got a gig coming up out of town, and this is a great opportunity to put the ARC on-ear system to work out in the field. The one thing that the ARC on-ear system really promises is just really, really precise and dependable audio quality, much like the ARC system that we have at the studio. And the best way to find out how that's going to really work in the real world is to get out in the real world. This job gives me an opportunity to do some live recording, and this is really the perfect opportunity to test out the analog side of the ARC on-ear. So we could take the headphone out directly from the board and plug it into the analog in of the ARC system, and then turn it on, and we plug our headphones into the headphone out of that. And this is going to pad it down completely, which is pretty impressive considering how hot the analog signal coming out of the board actually is. One of the nicest surprises we discovered using the ARC in a live sound environment is that it remembers the last preset configuration you were using before you unplug the device. This means you can use the preset configuration locations to plan ahead for jobs, and you can bounce back and forth effortlessly between a mix environment and a live sound environment without having to reconfigure everything each time you use the app or you turn the device on. Super handy. The ability to do a live show and recording earlier in the day and then switch gears completely and go into mix mode later on at night in the hotel room and then do a mix of that all on the same piece of hardware, all in the same day while traveling, really is a game changer. I think IK Multimedia has done something pretty groundbreaking here with the ARC on-ear system. Now, obviously they're not the first people to model studio software, but they are the first people to take serious room correction software and put it into a device that isn't married and tied to proprietary headphones or other systems like that. It means you don't have to buy into a hardware system you don't want to be a part of. You can use this with any of those modeled headphones, and there is a bunch of them. I mean, a bunch. So I think in that regard, this really breaks new ground. And the fact that it's a real machined aluminum chassis, that's such a huge thing. I'm so glad they didn't just make this another plastic box with a bunch of tech inside, especially because its intended purpose is to take it out in the real world on the road. It's gonna need that, and I think it has it in spades. It's a joy to work with. All the buttons and knobs are firm. They feel premium. They feel like this thing was really thought out and well made. All right, so pros and cons. Not every product is perfect. And if I had my wish list of things, there's a few things I'd like to see. For one, I'd like to see the headphone modeling kind of pool get bigger. I'm sure they're adding to it, but it would be great to see them model things maybe that aren't necessarily just high-end or mid-range. I'd like to see them actually model some things like a house brand, for example, Guitar Center Musician's Friend. They have house brand phones like Sterling, and some of the upper end of those are pretty good, and a lot of people have them. I'd like to see a wider variety of 8-inch full-size studio monitor models as well, just so that some of those, could appeal to even broader bases as well. But overall, I think this is an impressive box with unbelievably great specs and a chassis that is well thought out and really, really well made. Hey guys, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate it. If this was helpful in any way, please hit the subscriptions and notification bells. It does help keep a young channel like this going, and it helps keep it growing. Stay safe and be creative. Add something creative to the world because it could really, really use it. Take care. We'll catch you guys in the next video.